Welcome once again to Cinemaholics, where we talk about the biggest and best films coming to theaters and streaming online. From the San Francisco Bay Area, I'm John Negroni, chief editor of Cinemaholics, film critic for Awards Watch, The Spool, and The Young Folks, and I can't even put out Twitter fires. From Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he's a pop culture writer for Cinema Blend, and he's been spying on his neighbors from his window all morning. It's Will Ashton.
Hey.
You can find more episodes of Cinemaholics, including our full archive, on cinemaholics.com, where we also have written reviews and other bonus content. You can write into the show anytime by sending us an email. Say hello. Be sure to let us know what you think of all the movies we're talking about this week. Go to cinemaholicspodcast@gmail.com to hit us up. And if you'd like to support our show, help us keep everything here going on, please head on over to patreon.com/cinemaholics. We also have Cinemaholics merch. If you want to purchase a Cinemaholics hoodie, shirt, mug, shot glass, that's on cinemaholics.com. While supplies last, too, because we have a new logo, which means we're going to have new merch. So if you want the classic logo, you don't have all the time in the world. So links to that are in the show notes, along with our Patreon and everything else. Hope to connect with you all soon. Will Ashton this week sees a cavalcade of films that hit us, but we chose 3 to talk about.
Cavalcade?
Oh yeah, because it's not just a caravan. Wow. It's not just a bunch.
Sure.
It's a whole conglomerate of
the whole cavalcade
cinematic features. Now, of the ones we are watching and reviewing this week, they include Those Who Wish Me Dead, Woman in the Window, Oxygen. We have a couple in off topics for mini reviews because I didn't see one and you didn't see one, so we're gonna do a quick little mini review for each of those as well. But here are a few of the films that we didn't see that came out this weekend. There's quite a lot. First of all, there was Spiral from the book of Saw. I thought about seeing this, but here's the deal. I haven't seen a Saw movie since like Saw 5, so I really just don't have interest in the franchise. I know people were kind of looking forward to this. It stars Chris Rock, Samuel L. Jackson.
I was curious.
Yeah, there was a curiosity for me too, but I kind of saw some of the reviews coming out, and I just decided, you know what, not making this one a priority, so we don't have Spiral on the show this week.
Yeah, I mean, I might see it at some point. If I see it soon enough, I might do a bonus review if I have time, but yeah, we're not talking about it this week.
Sorry about that. There was also a pretty high-profile TV series, a mini-series, I believe. I think it's a limited series, from Barry Jenkins, who we, of course, usually see films from him. This is a new show called Underground Railroad. The entire series or season, again, I'm not 100% sure if there's going to be a season 2. I think it's a
limited series.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it's a 10-episode limited series.
It just dropped this past Friday, and we actually thought about making this our featured review. The thing was, we just didn't have time to see the whole thing. We're hoping, though, to catch it and maybe talk about it on a future date. Really want to make that happen. Similarly, we also want to do a special thing for The Killing of Two Lovers, which is kind of hitting a limited release right now. That is a new indie film from Neon, and we are looking to see that one. There was also Army of the Dead, the new Zack Snyder film. Now that's in select theaters right now, but then it's going to be coming to Netflix later this week. So we definitely are hoping to talk about that one on next week's show. And then there's also Riders of Justice, same situation. There's a new movie called High Ground. There's a festival documentary called The Perfect Candidate. What is going on, Will? This is the second week in a row where it just feels like every movie is getting dumped right now in the middle of May.
Yeah, and it's weird because next week is extremely light on new releases, to the point where I think that the biggest release next week is Army of the Dead, which is actually coming out this week, and like you said, select theaters. So I'm not quite sure what happened. I guess everyone's trying to get everything out before the hurdle of movies start to come in, because the end of May is when Cruella and A Quiet Place Part 2 and a few other movies are starting to come in. So I guess everyone was just like, we got to just get our stuff out before that happens. I guess what would be the start of this year's summer movie season.
Or just movie season in general at the box office. I mean, we've had some big movies come out, but nothing huge. And, you know, the biggest movie of the year, I think, so far in America is probably Godzilla vs. Kong still.
Yeah, but I mean, a traditional year, the summer movie season would have started, I guess, in the first weekend of May. like whatever that Friday was. So
well, we were getting to the point where Marvel was starting to release things toward the end of April. So there was like, Infinity War,
right.
Endgame, like those movies were coming out like last weekend before May. So it was like summer was stretching even further.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know if depending on how you want to look at it, either Godzilla versus Kong is the start of the summer movie season, or Cruella / Quiet Place Part 2 is the start of summer movie season. So however you want to look at it, it's coming or it's here.
Yeah, I think it's both probably is my guess there. I just looked it up, and yeah, Godzilla vs. Kong is the number 3 highest grossing film worldwide. It's the only American film in the top 3. The first 2 are Chinese films. And yeah, the only other movies I'm seeing on the top 10 that are from like an American studio are Tom and Jerry and then Raya and the Last Dragon. So we really just haven't quite seen the domestic box office take off quite yet. I know some people are a little disappointed. Mortal Kombat kind of underperformed for, I think, what they thought maybe that first weekend was kind of promising, that I was like, oh, maybe we could have another Godzilla versus Kong situation, but that movie's already kind of petered out. It's made 37 million domestically. Godzilla versus Kong like almost hit 100 million domestically, which is really impressive considering the pandemic of it all. So that's kind of where we're at. But all right, those are the movies we didn't talk about. It's time we talk about the ones we did. That's what we're here for. So first up, Will, you saw a new Screen Life, screen share movie. I forget what we're supposed to call these. I think Screen Life is like the,
Is that it? Okay, because I've been calling them screen shares. I even said that in my written review of the film, which is now available on cinemaholics.com.
Nice plug.
But sure. But is it Screen Life?
That's what I've read. I think people are still trying to stake out the terminology, but let's start there. What is that? What is a screen share, Screen Life? What kind of movie is that?
So that's a type of film similar to Searching and Unfriended and Host last year. Those are the type of films where you see all the action through the computer screens of the main characters. So basically, you're watching the movie the way that they would be seeing the events unfold on their computer screen. Now, some of the movies have, I don't think there's been an outright bad major screen share movie that I've seen. I know there's like some like Open Windows that are supposed to be not great, but I haven't seen those. But of the more prominent ones, I think they've all been pretty good. I know you really liked Searching, which is
great
also from the same producers of Profile and Unfriended. I believe I'm not going to pronounce his name right, but Timur
Bekmetov is how I'm going to try to pronounce it.
I know as a producer, I think he's behind both Unfriended movies and Searching, but this is the first one, Profile, that he directed, which had its festival release in 2018, which would have made it around the same time as Searching was coming out, because this came out at the Berlin Film Festival, if I'm not mistaken, and Searching was at Sundance.
We should be clear, though. The first Screen Life movie he's directed a a lot of other films. He directed like Wanted and Ben-Hur and the Abraham Lincoln one, the Vampire Hunter thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I forget, what's that trilogy of Russian movies called? It's like with angels.
There's
and
a
like
Night Watch, right?
Night Watch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Day Watch.
That's kind of his claim to fame. But for American audiences, it was Wanted for sure.
Yeah, that was the first movie from him I saw, I believe. Yeah, because I saw that in the theater.
Yeah.
Back in the day. So
you know what? Fun fact: that was the first R-rated film I saw in a theater.
Whoa, we had very different childhoods.
Sure.
My parents we've had this conversation off the air, but yeah. My family took me to some not great movies for kids.
Yeah, the only reason I was able to see it in theaters is because I had tickets to an advanced screening, and my parents do not want to pass up a free thing, so they indulged me in going to the theater to see this one. And I also remember it the movie shut off halfway through because there was like a lightning storm outside. So there was like a weird intermission halfway through.
Jeez. It was like the face were trying to keep you out of there.
I don't know. It was weird. But I did see the whole thing there, and that was the first R-rated film I saw in theater. So fun little factoid there.
There you go. And, it's come full circle because now you're watching an Angelina Jolie movie in the drive-in. So
I guess, yeah.
What a weird lap around the decade you did. But yeah, so Profile.
Yeah.
This premiered at the Berlin International Film Festival all the way back in 2018, but it's now only getting its release from Focus Features. You mentioned this is Screen Life. It's all through a computer. What's the gimmick, though, for this one, Will? What is this one all about?
So the movie itself is based on a nonfiction book called In the Skin of a Jihadist, which is written by a journalist named Anna Erli. And
I think it's Anna Erli.
She is not... Sorry, me again, not pronouncing people's names.
I only correct just in case she's listening. I want to make sure.
No, that's valid.
I could be wrong too, so if I'm double wrong, could be the scenario here. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I certainly don't know. But the main character of the film is Amy Whitaker, and she is a plucky young journalist based in Europe, or actually more specifically, I think she's based in London, and she's trying to get her feet wet, trying to get that major scoop that will push her into the big leagues. And the way she's trying to do that is by disguising herself as a young woman who's trying to join ISIS. And basically, we see from her perspective how she tries to win over a fellow or one member of ISIS who goes by the name of Bilel, or Bilel, who is played by Shazaz Latif.
Yeah.
And the lead actress, I should mention, Amy Whitaker, is played by Valeen Kane. And basically, from the movie's perspective, for a pretty brisk, I want to say like 105-minute runtime, we just follow her descent into ISIS from her computer as she's just trying to retrieve information, but she gets a little too close to the source. I think as a movie itself, I don't know. I heard some people say that this was a little far-fetched or a little too unrealistic, but I feel of the what we want to call them, screen life, screen share movies that we've gotten so far, this is the one that has its foot closest in reality, probably because it is based on a nonfiction book. So it didn't bother me as much. I will say that as the movie went along, you do have to kind of take some leaps in logic in terms of like, why is there footage of the stuff that she is showing us? Because like they do show the process of her like recording the conversation, so they do establish like how she's able to like have footage of this, but they're also showing stuff from before then, and it's supposed to be like recorded video, so it's like it doesn't really make sense in terms of like its own logic, like how this footage was retrieved. But again, with a type of thing like this, you're kind of here more for the visceral experience of it, like getting into this character's mindset. And obviously, like this is just trying to take a different approach to something that you could easily see this type of story being done in a traditional film format, but having it online does add a sense of urgency to it. But at the same time, the fact that this movie was, like we said, from 2018, it takes place in 2014, and it's coming out officially now in 2021, there is this weird sense of like it's not really of one sense of time. Like it's trying to be this sort of forward thinking film in terms of like, here's what we can do with this technology, here's what we can approach film in this new way, but it is also weirdly outdated at the same time. So that's something that kind of bothered me while I was watching it, but not enough to where I disliked the film. I found it to be generally pretty engaging and thoughtful, but at the same time, I wasn't like fully blown away by it in a way that I found myself really charmed by the Unfriended movies, and I was pretty gripped with the first 2/3 of Searching. But by and large, I think it's pretty good. This is the first one of these I saw on my laptop, so it also added a fun kind of surrealism in terms of like, you know, see all these things and pop-ups would come up and be like, oh, is that on my end or is this the movie itself?
Yeah.
And stuff, which is, it got a little frustrating for me just because it's just like, you know, I had to like kind of like parse through what's the film and what's on my end. But in any case, yeah, I mean, it's a fun film. I enjoyed it. Like I said, it hasn't really stuck with me much since I've seen it. It's been about a week since I've seen it. So I don't think this one's going to really rock the boat in any particular way, but I think it's worthwhile. I'd give it like a solid B-. It's a fun little thriller, but nothing truly substantial.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that it kind of was in limbo for so long, right? Because it played at South by Southwest, and it didn't get acquired by anybody until literally this past March. Focus just kind of dropped it here. I'm a little curious about that, though, because I mean, it's kind of a low-budget movie. I could see this playing fine in like 2019, but...
Right.
Yeah.
Or 2020 even. Like, I don't know why they opted for a theatrical release, because this would have obviously been fine if they released this on VOD and people watched it on their computers or TVs. Right. Like, I don't really understand why they were adamant about it being a theatrical release, but oh well.
Well, I think because no one had the distribution rights yet. But I guess it just was one of those things that was just hanging out there and nobody wanted it for whatever reason. So I don't know. I don't know if it has to do with the subject matter or if, it just kind of got lost in the shuffle. I don't know.
I think the easiest answer is just that it didn't really have like a star. And it's not like a horror movie where it can kind of like sell itself on like a goofy premise, like Unfriended. But then like obviously like Searching had, John Cho, right?
And Deborah Messing.
Yeah, Deborah Messing. So, it has names in it that could sell it. And also had like the Sundance buzz going in for. And this, I guess, had kind of a more muted response in comparison. Like it wasn't talked about quite as much. So could have been a number of factors. I don't exactly know. But yeah, it was very weird to see, like I said, a 2018 film that takes place in 2014 in 2021.
All right, well, that is Profile. You said you were a B- on it. And yeah, people can watch it right now. You said through VOD, correct?
Right now, I believe it's only in theaters, but it should be on VOD in the next month or so, if I'm not mistaken.
All right. Well, then I want to talk about a new movie called The Djinn. And Will, did you have a chance to see this one, or do you plan on seeing The Djinn anytime soon?
Oh, I haven't seen it, but I am curious to check it out based on the reviews.
Yeah. This is another one that I'm kind of surprised is coming out now. This would have been kind of a fun little creepy thriller we could have watched in VOD last year. Kind of would have fit into that mold, but this is a very, very simple, low budget, kind of in a charming way, horror movie coming to us from IFC Midnight. And I like this one okay. This was a fun little watch. You know me, I tend to watch these horror movies kind of early in the morning. This one, though, I watched in the afternoon. So I met you halfway this time. And this movie is a supernatural horror film. It was written and directed by David Charbonnier and Justin Powell. And it definitely feels like a fun little movie that they wanted to put out based on like just a cool little idea they had of like, okay, what if we just sort of placed a horror movie in this one location? We put a little bit of a twist on the genie wish fulfillment, literally sort of plot that we've seen in a lot of movies. This one stars Ezra Dewey as a kid named Dylan and his father, Rob Brownstein, who plays a character named Michael. And the entire movie takes place in just this one little apartment that they just moved into. And we find out pretty early on that Dylan has asthma and he's also mute. And he lost his mother at some point. We don't know why at first. And as they're moving into this new house, Dylan has the entire apartment to himself. And his father is a radio DJ, so he's off in the witching hour doing radio DJ stuff. And the kid is sort of unpacking, and he comes across a peculiar book that gives him instructions, very mysterious instructions around the ability of maybe him summoning a Djinn or a genie that can grant a single wish, but it has a few rules. And he starts to uncover those rules and maybe attempt to bring this genie himself. Over the course of the movie, I think we all kind of know where this is headed. Some spooky stuff starts to happen, and getting your wish granted isn't as simple as it may seem at first glance, especially if you're a kid. So a lot of this movie is a tense, suspenseful chase thriller where he has to come up with ways to survive the night. It's very thrilling in that respect. And what's very interesting about the setup of this movie is because he is mute, it is one of those movies where you have to sort of play into how the disability can sort of inform his thinking and his cleverness and how he sort of gets around some of these situations and is able to adapt to the dangers that are starting to haunt him. And there were a few moments in this movie where I thought it was going down a direction that I think would have been really regrettable. It's like, oh no, it's this kind of movie. Okay, we're going to do this. But it surprised me in the very end. I think that some critics will not fully connect with what it ultimately does in the end. A lot of it is fairly predictable. There's nothing here that you are going to be like, wow, what a message. I've never thought, be careful what you wish for. Taking that to heart. We kind of know where this is going, but I think because it's happening to a kid, you can sort of chalk that up to like, yes, like I could see why this kid wants to do this. I could see why this kid is making these decisions. And I was able to connect and feel for this kid in a lot of really compelling emotional ways. I think he's a really, really good actor, Ezra Dewey. I think the fact that he doesn't speak to the entire performance has to be completely through his expressions, through his body language, and he really nails it. He carries the movie. He's one of the only characters throughout most of the movie. The rest of the characters are just sort of like plot devices, not really characters, right? And see, he does a tremendous job. They did a great job casting this one. And yeah, if you're in the mood for a kind of low stakes, bump in the night kind of thriller horror, this is definitely a satisfying one. Not amazing, and definitely there were some things in it that I could have done without, but I think it's a pretty solid B-. And yeah, I guess we're doubling up on B- for mini reviews. But I guess that speaks to, like, I guess you and me, we weren't like, you gotta see Profile. Oh, you gotta see the Djinn. We were just kind of like, these are kind of
right,
not disposable at all. Like, people worked really hard on these movies, but they are a little bit of like one of many movies that came out this week, and it was just difficult to figure out what really demanded our time in reviewing together, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I do find it weird that both Spiral and the Djinn came out now, because they seem like premiered like September or October releases for the month of October, but or for the month of Halloween, I mean. But oh well,
yeah.
You got to get these movies out.
Forgot to mention that it takes place in the 80s, which kind of helps too. It's very analog, and I liked that. I like where it goes in that direction. But that is the Djinn and Profile, our two mini reviews. I guess it's time for us to get into the main event, the big movie we saw that just came out on HBO Max and has just been released in theaters by Warner Brothers under the New Line Cinema banner. Man, what was the last time we saw the New Line banner? I'd have to think about it, because it's been a minute, hasn't it?
I think there was something fairly recently that came out through New Line, but I can't think of what it is off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'd have to look at it, because I really can't remember what was probably their most recent.
But I do believe this is the first one that they've released through their new logo, because Warner Brothers has a new logo now.
Yeah.
And I think this is the first time they've released it through the New Line thing. So that was a little weird to see, but I could be wrong there. There might have been something recently that I'm just blanking on.
So interesting. So I looked it up, and there's a couple of movies that they helped with, like Mortal Kombat and Super Intelligence, but I'm not seeing any where it's like straight up New Line, because I don't remember seeing that label. Apparently they worked on The Good Liar, It Chapter 2, Blinded by the Light, The Kitchen. But yeah, I don't know. I maybe it's because I just can't remember seeing the logo. I don't know. But regardless.
Yeah, because I mean, I saw Super Intelligence in December, so that's probably the last thing I saw from New Line before this.
I'll say Elf was the last one. That is objectively false.
Sure, like a rewatch of Elf.
Yeah, there you go. But anyway, so yeah, this is the latest in HBO Max's one movie per month that they're putting out that is also available in streaming. Last month was Mortal Kombat, of course, and then the month before that was Godzilla vs. Kong. This month is Those Who Wish Me Dead, which is being billed as a neo-Western action thriller. Just another way of saying it is kind of a modern, contemporary Western, very much of the same movies that Taylor Sheridan, who directed this movie, has done before, with like Hell or High Water, Sicario, Wind River, these movies that really emphasize the American West and how it sort of fits into our modern present. A lot of these movies are about that. They're about the changes that the Western genre has really experienced since the old days, the old cinematic days where it was High Noon and it was the Searchers and all of that.
Yeah, and also Yellowstone, which is on Paramount Network as a TV show.
The Kevin Costner series, yeah.
Yeah, which I haven't watched, but apparently is like extremely popular. Based on just numbers on CinemaBlend. So I don't know what, I mean, I guess it's just appealing to a niche that really likes, like you said, Westerns or neo-Westerns, and they're not really getting them from Hollywood outside of Taylor Sheridan. So he's definitely scratching an itch that seems to be appealing to quite a few people, which good for him.
He is. Yeah, and he's doing it well by and large. I think that he tends to write. You know, he co-wrote this screenplay with Michael Corrieda and Charles Levitt, and he hasn't directed a lot of movies. And I'll be honest, I don't think he has been the strongest director. He did direct Wind River, and I gotta say, I just don't think that movie was directed very well, but I did like the script of that movie. So that said, I mean, he's just so far apparently been a great showrunner for Yellowstone, but I haven't seen that. This movie really fits though into the mold of like the late 90s, early 2000s, mid-budget movie where you have the main actor being somebody who is kind of in that Marvel superhero age where it's like they're vaguely in their 40s, right? And so it's like it's somebody who's like not that old, but they're not that young. And so you're Bruce Willis kind of actor. I guess at this point, somebody like he's back in the day would have been like Steven Seagal, but these days it would probably be like Will Smith, something like that. And in this case, that person filling that role is Angelina Jolie. And we kind of have like a mishmash of plots here. We have like a smoke jumper plot where Angelina Jolie plays this firefighter who lives in Montana, and she's just gone through this traumatic thing. And then we also have this plot where there's this pair of assassins in Florida coming after a family, a father and son who are aware of some conspiracy. Back in Montana, we have John Bernthal and Medina Sangwar as this couple who are expecting, but they're related to the family who's on the run. And then everything kind of intersects. I don't want to give a ton away because yeah, this is one of those movies where I think the prologue is really long and it's easy to kind of give things away that happen like half an hour to an hour into the movie. So I'll keep it vague for now. But that said, this is kind of a twisty, turny sort of action thriller in the purest sense. And my only major criticism, I was really with this movie throughout the whole way. I was interested in the characters and in the plot, and I thought the assassins played by Aidan Gillen and Nicholas Hoult were really strong characters. I really liked them. But I liked to hate them. I'll say it like that. All of that stuff was really working kind of in its own way. But I gotta say, this movie just doesn't... The third act, I was a little bit disappointed. I didn't think the third act really landed as well as the first 2/3, but I think that it still works out and has its moments. And I ended up liking this movie quite fine. I think this is a pretty solid one. But what about you, Will?
Yeah, I thought it was fine. Like you said, it's a nice throwback to the sort of star-driven, mid-budget character dramas that we just rarely get nowadays, especially from a studio like Warner Brothers or subsequently New Line. In that sense, it was fun to see something like this again, something that's clearly made for adults. It's a little pulpy, a little bit goofy at times, but it's also, kind of playing it straight. It's not really like winking in terms of its approach. It's not ironic in any particular sense. It's pretty beholden to the Western drama thriller genres in a way that I do respect and appreciate. But at the same time, I feel like it's kind of missing something that I've been trying to put my finger on, and I haven't really figured it out yet. I think part of it is that like you do see the Taylor Sheridan touches, especially when the movie tends to slow down and let characters talk. For instance, there's a scene where Angelina Jolie is on a rock and she's on a phone or like some sort of comm device, and she's just reflecting on her own struggles. And I really like that Taylor Sheridan tends to establish characters through dialogue and action as opposed to like overbearing exposition and things like that. He usually kind of lets the characters disclose like their troubles through interactions and things like that. And I think those are the moments that tend to work for me the best. But one thing I really like about Taylor Sheridan's style is that I think by his own admission, he is allergic to exposition. So he generally tends to develop characters through dialogue and action, which I think is also the case here. And when I tend to like the movie best is when characters tend to disclose their troubles or their prerogatives in a way that feels a little bit more organic to the scene. And like I said, I think that's the case here as well. But at the same time, I don't think he's really doing a lot with what I find to be a fairly boilerplate action thriller / Western that, I mean, in some sense, I don't think it's trying to do anything particularly new or reinvent the wheel in any way. But at the same time, I also feel like his character impulses don't fully mesh with what's a very studio-driven action thriller character thing, which I don't know. It just, like I said, I'm still trying to figure out exactly what's not really working for me. Because by and large, I agree with you. I think it's fine. Like I think the performances are pretty good. I like that the script is super tight. I also tend to like that the movie itself doesn't waste too much time in terms of like getting things going. Like just from like the get-go, things are exploding and we're on the move, and I tend to appreciate that about Taylor Sheridan's style. But at the same time, I wasn't like fully gripped with it in a way that I found his other, I guess, a little bit more dark other films were able to grip me a little bit easier.
I was mostly gripped with it. I just think it's hard to get past how basic the directing is. It really just feels like it's not his strong suit, because you have a lot of moments in this movie where you have to balance these sort of, and Adonis Gonzalez, film editor for Cinemaholics, he talked about this in his review, and I think he was spot on about how like you have two kind of key themes of this movie, or you have two approaches where you have these like really grounded emotional performances that you have to direct one way, and then you have all of the like hootin' tootin' like gunplay stuff. And I like those two things in this movie individually, but they just don't really mesh together. Like, I think a lot of this stuff doesn't mesh together very well. There's this whole thing where the assassins are like, we'll distract the police using a forest fire. It is such a dumb thing. like when you really think about it, like, it's stupid. It really is stupid. And it really just stresses them as too sociopathic in a movie that is trying to make them not 100% sociopathic, or at least the Nicholas Hoult character, you see him waver here and there. So some of that stuff, I'm just like, this feels like a screenplay decision that a more competent director could have found a better way to bring to fruition. And so, not to knock Sheridan too much, because I think he is successful in some of his directing choices. I think the actual shootouts in the third act and kind of throughout are really tense, really well done. I really felt the survival aspect of this movie. I really felt like these characters were in danger a lot. This kid in this movie is being just repeatedly traumatized, and I do like that he finds ways to just let the kid be a kid without the sort of annoying trope of like, well, we can't tell the kid what's really going on. We have to hide things from him the entire time. I kind of like that the movie sort of levels with him early on. It's kind of refreshing, actually. And I guess, that does feel like a very Sheridan thing to do. And also, Jolie, was it hard for you to kind of get past the fact that like she's a really great actor and she sells being a firefighter in Montana, but she can only do so much? It really was tough for me to swallow that, like, and this wasn't Angelina Jolie the entire time I saw her in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, that was my main issue with the performance, was that it wasn't a bad performance, but it just felt like a performance throughout, especially a film like this that is trying to be a little bit more grounded, like definitely more of a character drama. I just never really felt like, okay, I'm watching a character here. I'm just like, I'm watching Angelina Jolie play a character. And I don't mind that she's like, because I like that she's doing movies like this again, because for the past few years, she's either been directing or she's been doing movies like Maleficent or the upcoming Eternals. And so, like, she's been in blockbuster mode for a long time, and she hasn't really done movies like this. The last time I can remember her doing something like this was By the Sea, which she also directed. So, in that respect, I do appreciate that she is going back to this, but I do agree with you that it did feel like I'm watching Angelina Jolie play a character, and this is her, like, it felt like a Hollywood star playing a character, which I don't necessarily mind. It kind of reminds me of, like, Tom Cruise movies from the 90s, like something like Jerry Maguire, where it's like, you don't fully buy that he's, like, a guy, but at the same time, he has that movie star charisma. And I think that's generally the case with Angelina Jolie as well. So, I don't know. I was a little give or take on that as well, but I do agree with you that it did take me out of it, because I never was just like, I'm watching her character. I'm just like, I'm watching Angelina Jolie's performance.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It is kind of strange to me too that, I mean, this wasn't supposed to be her like follow-up movie to, I mean, let's see. So she did Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, and then she had a role in that Brenda Chapman movie, Come Away, that I don't even remember if Come Away actually got like any sort of actual release. It was just in the festivals,
yeah, right? I did see that, but that was like a supporting performance.
It was, yeah. So we haven't seen her kind of in a lead performance since Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, because then in One and Only Ivan, she was just like a voice. And we were supposed to get Eternals last year, and so that kind of got pushed down. So now we have this movie, and it does feel like a very curious decision for her as an actor to do something like this. I think that in a lot of her roles, she's really leaned her star power in her favor. The fact that people just recognize her so quickly and so easily that, yeah, it makes sense to put her in these like larger than life roles like Maleficent and Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and even something like Alexander, where she has to be like the mother of like a great conqueror. Like that kind of thing really works for just how iconic she is as a human being. And yeah, so it is kind of curious that she was cast in this kind of movie, which really leans on her. I mean, I applaud her for going back to something that she used to do more regularly, but yeah, I struggled a bit.
Yeah, I mean, the last time I saw her in something like this, as far as I can recall, that was just like a character piece and not like a genre film, was Changeling, the Clint Eastwood movie. But that was like kind of more of like a melodrama, so like that like kind of made sense that she would play it a little bit broader. But I don't know, it just seems like her performance doesn't really fit Sheridan's vibe. Like he's definitely trying to do something like when I think back on like Emily Blunt in Sicario, I know he didn't direct Sicario, but like she is able to kind of do like kind of bigger movie star roles, but also do something that's like a little bit more subtle and a little bit more grounded. And I think she's a little bit better at like balancing that type of performance as opposed to Angelina Jolie at this point, where she is just such a movie star that I don't know if she can really rein it back that much. But like I said, that also kind of added to the 90ness of it, so it was also sort of appealing to me at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, she's one of the last big Hollywood stars in the traditional sense, I'd say, and Emily Blunt kind of represents the kind of new Hollywood star where just because she's in something doesn't mean it's going to be successful, but when she's good in something good, people really come out for it. So all that said, I thought she was fine in this on a technical level, but yeah.
I mean, I thought her performance was like very thoughtful. Like it definitely was a very considerate performance. I just never really fully bought it as like I'm watching her character. I just am watching her performance.
I do think John Bernthal's character in here is a little bit hacked. And I do appreciate that Sheridan in his movies has allowed Bernthal to kind of not just be the standard Walking Dead bad guy, kind of a scumbag, also not like the Punisher anti-hero character. I don't know, he just gives Bernthal like way more sympathetic roles than he tends to get cast in, which I appreciate. But in this movie, he doesn't really get to do all that much. He's just kind of like trudging along the movie. I was much more invested in Nicholas Hoult and Aidan Gillen, the assassin characters, and they are a bit tropey for Sheridan. Sheridan always kind of has like bad guys like this. We don't know much about them, but we just sort of we get to know them through their actions more than anything else. But yeah, I thought Hoult and Gillen were a really, like, I hate to use the word fun, but fun pair. Like, I think that they had like a really good rapport, a really good, like, I believed that these guys were dangerous, like very, very quickly.
I agree with you about Holt. There's like something kind of like, I don't want to say unhinged, but there's something like I could see him being someone who is like a little bit more unpredictable, but he's like trying to rein it in. Gillian, I've just seen so many times in these stock villain roles that I don't know. I didn't really think he added too much to it. I don't think he did a bad job, but it just kind of felt like another stock villain performance from Aidan Gillen to me.
I don't know. I thought maybe because the movie lets him kind of change throughout, he kind of starts to become a little bit more unhinged himself. And I would tend to agree with you because I think I tend to not really be into his performances ever since the whole Littlefinger Game of Thrones thing and how that really like put him in a box as an actor. And with the exception of maybe something like Sing Street, where I think he gets a little bit more room to do something different. That said, though, I think that it really rests on the contrast between him and Holt, because he's kind of like the mastermind. Holt is like the dutiful gun who is willing to sort of do whatever he's told, but then you sort of see how he processes the decision making of when he is given an order. And yeah, I found that maybe because the rest of the movie was not fascinating at all, maybe I give it a little bit of extra credit for that.
Yeah, I mean, Gillian's like the guy with the code in these films. Like he's a bad person and he'll do bad things, but he also has like a moral code. And Nicholas Holt's obviously the one that's like inexperienced, so he doesn't really have that morality. And I think on paper that's interesting, but their performances, I thought they're fine. Like with everything else in the movie, like I didn't dislike it, but I felt like there was some component there that could have been a little bit more interesting, or something that could have been fleshed out, and the movie just opted to rein it back and didn't really do a whole lot with it.
Well, I think generally speaking, I probably like this one a bit more than you did. I'm a B-, pretty high B-, mostly almost a B if the third act had just been a little bit better, a little bit tighter. I think that actually it is almost a little too tight. And I felt myself kind of being like, they set this up to be a little bit more epic in scope. And it really just came down to a handful of chase scenes that I don't think are that effective. And at the same time, I was kind of moved by some of the performances. And I thought, I really thought that Angelina Jolie and her relationship with the kid character in this, played by Finn Little.
Finn Little. Yeah.
I actually thought that really worked. And it was kind of the key to this entire movie working in a lot of ways. So I liked it. I think if you are into dad cinema, you like dad movies, this is definitely one of them. And I think it's going to do the job. But yeah, where do you land?
I'm not too far from you. Like I said, I think it's fine. Like I think it's a good like TNT type movie. Like if you're flipping through channels and this comes on at TNT, you'll watch a couple scenes and you'll probably, like on like a 2 p.m. Saturday afternoon, you'll probably enjoy it. But I don't think it's necessarily good or great at what it's trying to do. I admire Taylor Sheridan for making a pulpier movie than his other films. Like some of his other ones, especially Wind River, which I think I like a little bit more than you, just a bit based on the way that you're talking about it. I do agree with you that movie gets a little too like down on itself. It gets a little like too moody in a way. It's just bleak. Like, all right, like yeah, it's like calm down, Taylor Sheridan.
Yeah, there is hope for people in general.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one fallback. I think his best film, I would say, is probably Hell or High Water at this point. Like, that's his tightest script, and I think that's probably, like, the best dialogue, best characters, and stuff like that. And I don't think he's quite reached that level yet, and I don't know if that's because of his direction per se, but I don't think he's a bad director. I just, like I said, like, I think his impulses are kind of going against what the studio is wanting from him, which is like a throwback sort of cheesy character piece with big stars. And he's trying to do something a little bit more reined in and like, intuitive, and having like, kind of more grounded characters with a weighted conscience and stuff like that. And I don't think those impulses quite mesh together, sort of like what Adonis is referring to based on the way you're describing his review. I'm curious to check it out. But, yeah, I think for me it's a high C+. Like I think it generally works, and I do agree with you that the relationship, kind of the mother-son dynamic between Finn Little and Angelina Jolie is at least pretty good. Like I found it to be nice enough, but I don't know. I think this is maybe a little too throwaway. Like there's just not enough here that really stuck with me either morally or quality-wise to make me go like, all right, this was like fully worth the investment that I put into it. But not a bad film, just sort of fine.
All right. Well, that is Those Who Wish Me Dead. Critics are basically where we're at. It has a 64% on Rotten Tomatoes with an average rating of 5.7 out of 10. So yes, a little bit above average, pretty mixed overall. Most critics are liking it fine, that kind of thing. And I think that pretty much matches where we land ourselves. The movie is 100 minutes long, and you can watch it right now on HBO Max or in select theaters. Next up, we're talking about the next two movies are going to be Netflix movies technically, but this one is a Netflix movie that has sort of been long in the tooth here. So Woman in the Window, or The Woman in the Window, is a psychological thriller directed by Joe Wright, and Tracy Letts did the screenplay. It's based on a few things. So it's supposed to be more so based on the novel by A.J. Finn, a 2018 novel. But there is also The Woman in the Window, the 1944 Fritz Lang film, which itself was adapted from a novel as well. And so there's a lot of women, there's a lot of windows. And I was actually kind of revisiting the 1944 film myself pretty recent last night after I watched Woman in the Window, and there's a few connective tissues, but not much, which I guess is why they're really not billing this in any way as a remake. It's not very different setup for the film, to be totally certain. But yeah, it just hit Netflix, and it's interesting because this movie, so Fox originally had this movie. They were going to, I think, adapt this novel like before it had even come out, because this was back in like 2016. So there's a whole story behind this movie where they shot it in 2018, so 3 years ago, and they had to do a bunch of reshoots. They did some rewrites. It got delayed to come out in 2019, and then you know what happens next. the Fox deal. No, I'm just kidding. But it really was supposed to be theatrically released by 20th Century Fox in 2019. At that point, because it was delayed after like Disney took over Fox, obviously, and they set a new release date for just like literally a year ago yesterday, May 15th, 2020. But then they took it off the calendar because of the whole pandemic. We always got to find a way to mention that every episode. But yeah, there you go.
Sure. Well, I mean, it's unavoidable.
Now we're getting this thing a year later because Netflix acquired the distribution rights just this past fall from, now it's called 20th Century Studios, which is why when you watch this movie on Netflix, it starts with the 20th Century Studios logo, which is pretty wild to me that I still can't get used to it. I don't know about you, but it's like 20th Century Studios and you're like, man, they took out the Fox. But then the movie starts and it's like Fox 2000 presents. Yes. So I thought that was kind of
well, I mean, you're only mentioning like half the issues that the movie has gone through.
Yeah, I know. I'm kind of glossing over a bunch of stuff.
I mean, it's worth mentioning that A.J. Finn, the author of the book, there's a pretty scandalous New Yorker article about him that came out either in 2018 or 2019 that, just pretty bluntly said that he's a serial fabulist, among other things. And that, it basically just spelled out that he uses book as a way to like kind of like push himself into like the like prestige drama category, or like whatever these like Gone Girl and like Girl on the Train, like these like pulpy thriller novels that got like these prestige dramas, and like there's obviously something kind of cynical about like his approach to it, to say the least.
To be clear, so what you're saying is, 'cause I don't know if people are like totally caught up, he made a bunch of stuff up about his life, is the short of it. Or he was accused of making things up, like saying that his mother suffered from cancer. And like lost her to a brain tumor. Yeah, and his brother, he claimed his brother committed suicide, all kinds of stuff. And he apparently didn't he take it all from a film literally called Copycat?
I think so, yeah. It's a wild article. I mean, very well written article, but it just like, man, I don't know. Like, if this is even half true, like this guy is but anyway.
I think he blamed it on his bipolar disorder.
Yeah. Which I mean, I'm not really, I'm just explaining the facts. Like, I don't really want to dive into it too much, truth be told. But
just saying, that's his defense.
Yeah, sure, fair enough. But also, this is, I think, possibly the last film they'll be credited to producer Scott Rudin, which is also kind of weird to see here, because he has been. I mean, it's been well known that he has been pretty well known as a serial abuser as well in his workplace. And now he's kind of getting repercussions to it, and his name has been pulled from a lot of upcoming films. But for a reason, it is on this film. So
I think that's a contractual thing, because I mean, this the whole thing with the Scott Rudin stuff coming out was just this past April, like a month ago. So I think like the way that movies work, like you just can't make a change like that without violating some sort of contract that quickly.
Yeah. And like you said, it's the last Fox 2000 film, possibly the last Fox film. I don't even know at this point what's going on with Fox. And also, I think Tracy Letts and Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, who were previously going to do the score for this film, have both basically disowned it publicly, being like, this is not our vision. Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor just like, we pulled our score from this thing. So,
but then Danny Elfman was like, I can do it. I'll do it. I got it. This
Give
movie,
me 2 hours and 2 cups of coffee, and I'll put something together.
Yeah, exactly. This movie wants you to forget about Fox so much that it almost renamed its character, who is Dr. Anna Fox.
Yeah,
that was a bad joke.
Anna 20th Century Studios. Yeah. So anyway, my point is just that this movie has gone through the ringer, not only because of the pandemic, and I almost sort of feel bad for it at this point.
I guess. I mean, there's people in it who, like, there's great actors. I mean, this is one of those movies where you're watching it and you're like, who's next? Like, who are we going to see next? We have Amy Adams, of course, starring, but we also have Gary Oldman. We have Anthony Mackie. We have Wyatt Russell, Brian Tyree Henry, and then Julianne Moore. Yeah. And then at one point, Jennifer Jason Leigh just shows up. And I'm like, of course. Like, why not? And of course, Tracy Letts gets a fun little role since he is a producer and he wrote the screenplay. I was thinking of how Tyler Perry was in Those Who Wish Me Dead and was a producer.
Yeah, he was pretty good in that. I forgot to mention that. I thought, I actually like him in like supporting actor mode.
Yeah, he's an imposing guy. He should be in roles like that more often. He's good at.
Yeah, I mean, But anyway, he's on this film.
Yeah, we're squeezing a little extra part of that review. Yeah, Woman in the Window. So the story here, and like we said, borrowed quite a bit from Copycat and a lot of other things. I mean, that's the first thing you'll notice about this movie is like, I feel like I've seen this before. Between its devotion to Rear Window, a lot of Hitchcock,
right? Spellbound,
Disturbia. It just goes on and on. But the setup is that we follow a child psychologist named Anna Century, Anna Fox, played by Amy Adams, who lives all by herself in an apartment in Manhattan. We quickly learn that she's separated from her husband, played by Anthony Mackie, and her daughter Olivia. But she still talks to them basically every single day. She has something called agoraphobia, which means that she is unable to leave her house. She feels like she has to stay in there. And for that reason, she kind of spies on all of her neighbors from her window, hence Woman in the Window. And while she is observing a new family moving into the house across the street, she starts to maybe build a very strange, kind of tense sort of dynamic with this family as one by one, they each come to her apartment for a visit. And from there, things get a little strange, a little weird. So Gary Oldman plays the father figure of the family across the street. We also have Julianne Moore, who plays this woman named Jane Russell. And we also have a kid named Ethan, 15-year-old kid played by Fred Heckinger, who's the first one to come visit her, a teenager. And yeah, as the movie goes on, you can tell something is a little bit off. Amy Adams' character is on a lot of meds. She is having a little bit of difficulty with her tenant, David, played by Wyatt Russell, who lives in the basement. And at some point, she even tries to get the police to help her out. And one of the detectives, played by Brian Tyree Henry, is just trying to kind of keep her subdued, trying to like help her maybe not keep doing all this spying, taking photos of her neighbors, that sort of thing. This is a movie with a lot of effort. Like they tried with this, I think. Like they really wanted to make a movie that was tense and dynamic and had a lot of characters. That could be like a prestigious sort of noir film. I mean, naming something Woman in the Window certainly lends a lot to that, considering that the Fritz Lang film helped kind of create the noir genre. But I gotta say, it for me, really difficult to get past how tropey and familiar and obvious this script is. I think a lot of people who've watched more than a few noir films are going to see a ton of stuff coming here. I mean, it's just too predictable. I haven't called the twist in an Amy Adams movie this quickly since Arrival, but that's a little braggy. Sorry. But yeah, Will, what did you think of The Woman in the Window?
Yeah, I mean, this is almost comically derivative of other films, to the point where I mean, I haven't read the book that it's based on, but if it is close to this, which I don't even know if it is, because as you were mentioning, it's gone through so many reshoots that I don't even know if this is a faithful adaptation of the book. It could just be, so hackneyed and Frankensteined at this point that it doesn't really resemble what was in the text. But the material itself just feels so boilerplate. Like even by like throwaway paperback airplane novel standards, this feels like terribly predictable and derivative. But there is, like you said, like this kind of prestige sheen to it, where it has like all these big stars. Like, like there's a lot of visual flair to this in a way that I actually did kind of admire. I really actually did enjoy the cinematography from Bruno Denubal. I'm probably mispronouncing that, as I mispronounce most names. But
yeah, I think it's Bruno De Bonal, but I'm not 100% sure myself.
Yeah, but I mean, there's like a lot of fun like blocking and staging here, like to the point where it kind of felt like, look, this movie is not gonna pick up. Let's just get really weird with the visuals, and like there's just like a big apple that floats on the screen, and then just like kind of weird blocking. A lot of like De Palma-esque blocking. Like that's actually, I felt I was thinking back on more of De Palma's stuff than I was Hitchcock, even when the movie was sort of hand-fisting Hitchcock stuff into the film. I just kept, especially because the movie has like this kind of like trashy thriller quality to it that because the movie itself is so inconsistent in style, it almost seems to indulge in a weird way that, I don't know, I didn't hate this film the way that some folks are. Like, some folks are really bringing their knives out for this film, and I guess I just found it to be so, like I said, trashy and throwaway with these big name stars that, I found it to be almost amusingly inert, but not in a terribly offensive way, with the exception maybe of there's one character in the film who is portrayed potentially as autistic that could be seen as offensive.
Yeah, it's funny you say amusingly inert too, because that's kind of how I felt about his last movie, Joe Wright, Darkest Hour. Because I thought, so he comes out with Pan in 2015, trying to kick off a franchise. Pan famously, at least infamously for me, it was just one of my least favorite movies of that. I just hated that movie. And I hated just how shamelessly pandering it was to trying to generate or regenerate an IP in one of the just most uninteresting ways.
I think I'm actually kind of in the same vein with that film as I am with this film, where, like, I agree with you, it's a bad film and it makes a lot of baffling decisions, but I was almost half amused by all the baffling decisions that it made, and that's kind of where I'm at with this film as well.
It's just weird because, I'm not the biggest fan of The Soloist, which he did in 2009, but I mean, after films like Hannah and Anna Karenina, and he, of course, did Pride and Prejudice, Atonement. I mean, we know this guy can make movies that at least satisfy critics and can get a lot of awards attention, right? And yeah, it's kind of baffling to me where his career has sort of gone at this point. I mean, we should say Darkest Hour did get a lot of awards buzz for Gary Oldman, obviously, and it got nominated. And didn't Gary Oldman actually, it got nominated for Best Picture, but didn't Gary Oldman also win the Oscar?
Yeah, he won for Best Actor.
Yeah.
More of a legacy Oscar,
right?
To be fair, but he did win.
He was up against Daniel Day-Lewis, and they were just like, he's got enough Oscars, and that's kind of the situation. But yeah, that's kind of how I'm feeling about this movie, Woman in the Window, where I wish I saw them kind of going more full tilt into some genre unpredictability. I mean, it does it a little bit. There's like a car in a living room at one point where I was like, man, where's this movie? Like, this is the kind of movie I want to see, where they just kind of, I think, though, where the movie loses me is how it frames all of this stuff around mental health. This movie is about as precise and considerate with mental health issues as I guess you can reasonably expect from a Hollywood filmmaker. I just really just don't get the sense that Joe Wright and I hate to say it, but Tracy Letts, I feel like they're just trying to really heighten the mental health experience in a way that is just like, come on. Like, I just didn't buy it.
All right, I'll let Tracy Letts off the hook because, like I said, for one, I think that's the material, and two, I think that might be the reshoots. Sure. Like, I don't know what the original version of this movie was, and like I said, Tracy Letts has basically said, this is not my movie. Like, don't, like, whatever I did with this is not enough. What the studio wanted. So I'll let him off the hook just because, like, it seems like he made a more like subdued, thoughtful movie that test audience are just like, why is nothing happening? Like, why are we? I don't understand.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't actually know what happened with the test screenings, but from what I was told, audiences were confused about things, so they added a bunch of stuff. They retested the film. It didn't get a better response, so Scott Rudin and his team were just like, screw it, just throw it out.
Yeah.
We this one got burnt in the oven. So yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I don't really know what the original version of this movie was. I'd be curious to see it, release the right cut. Why not? Just because I'm kind of curious
let's cut
to know what the original version is. But like, this movie feels like it's on like 1.5 speed the whole time. Like it feels like it's constantly like breathless, like trying to get everything out. And I have to assume that is because of the reshoots. Like, they're just trying to jam so much information into this movie that it's almost kind of dizzying how much they're trying to do for a like almost 2-hour runtime. And I think that also kind of adds to the weirdness of it and like all the baffling decisions that it made, that like it's just constantly throwing things at you that like it's kind of hard to be bored by it because it's just constantly trying to like divert your attention or do visual tricks or like do all these different things in a hyper derivative narrative. But yeah, that doesn't make it a good film in the least.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I could see people watching this and, maybe they won't catch some of the big twists that, like if you've never seen like if you haven't seen a lot of these movies and you're just sort of like breezing Netflix and you like Amy Adams, sure, I could see people watching this and like, that's not to talk down to anybody whatsoever. It's just like, this just is one of those films that punishes people who watch too many movies because it's just hard to get through it. Because you're like, when are you going to get to the part? We know this is about gaslighting. We know, and that is another thing. The gaslighting of this movie just feels a little bit like, I don't know. It rang very hollow to me what they're trying to say here about. We've seen a lot of movies kind of go down this road of like how mental health is in a way like used to like gaslit people, and I'm not saying movies like that shouldn't exist at all. Like not saying that whatsoever. Just that if you're gonna do it, I think you need to do it in a more interesting, kind of compelling new way, not just sort of do what we've seen before.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing for me is that like the material based on how it's presented here feels super cynical in terms of just like trying to ride the coattails of other book success and other story success. And the movie almost feels a little cynical in the fact that it's trying to be this prestige drama for presumably award attention. But because it's gone through this whole rigmarole of reshoots and like people entering and leaving the project and stuff like that, that almost kind of regains its sort of like trashy B quality, which is where I find the divide kind of fascinating for me, is that like by being worse, it almost becomes better, if that makes sense.
Almost. Yeah. And kind of, I can kind of see what you're saying there. Yeah, this has been a tough time for Amy Adams. You know, I think she's still as talented as ever, but she's just picking projects like this. And I haven't seen Hillbilly Elegy, but based on what I know of that movie, just projects that don't really suit her talents. And, you know, there was also Vice, I guess, which I just really didn't feel like she made much of an impression. I gotta say, I don't think I've really...
I thought she was all right.
Well, I think the last thing I saw her in that I thought I was really like hooked with her performance was probably Sharp Objects, the HBO miniseries, which...
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, but I heard it's good.
Movie-wise, yeah, I mean, we've gotten this and like, you know, her Lois Lane thing and like the 2 rounds of Justice League we've gotten recently. So yeah, I just think that I'm hoping that Amy Adams is going to be part of some films that kind of harken back to, I think, her at her actual best as an actor.
I mean, I thought she was pretty good in Justice League, the Snyder Cut. Not the theatrical version. Like, theatrical version, everyone was bad in that. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you with Hillbilly Elegy. A pretty rare bad performance from Amy Adams, and it's like that was the type of performance where she clearly was trying, so it was just kind of embarrassing to watch her. This wasn't embarrassing to me. It was just like, it felt like she was just kind of confused, like she didn't really know what to do, either because of the reshoots or like the character was just so thinly drawn out that she just couldn't really do much with it. That like she was like, I mean, it makes sense like why she joined the project, but like probably through the whole thing she could see it was falling apart, and she was just like, I'm just going to try to do my best to salvage this thing, and you know, she couldn't, which I don't blame her for. But I do agree with you, it is a shame, especially for so many people who want Amy Adams to finally get that Oscar.
I know.
Not only to you know, make a good film again, but you know, actually finally get the critical acclaim that she deserves, and she's straddled by these lackluster projects that don't service her well.
Yeah, I think that really calls it. So I'm a C+ on this movie. I don't think it's terrible. I agree that I think, yeah, critics are really coming out for this one. And I think there's a lot to criticize, to be totally certain. But it is effective, you know, and as derivative as it is, it's at least executing the sort of stuff you would expect in ways that actually mimic a decent movie. So it's not like you're going to... I don't think this is a slog to get through necessarily. In fact, there were some parts that I thought were actually in the territory of like, this is so schlocky. I can actually kind of just get into this, and it's on its own terms in a way. So not a waste of a total, right. You know, this is such a Sunday matinee, curiosity satisfier. If you're really bored, it's that kind of movie for me.
Yeah, I think schlocky is probably the word I was searching for earlier, because like I said, like it went into this like trying to be sort of prestige and subdued, and because of all the reshoots and all this stuff, it became this kind of schlocky B movie by accident, I guess. Which I guess to me, like I said, it makes the movie worse, but at the same time, it also makes it a little bit more fun than I think it might have been otherwise. But like I said, I'd be curious to see what the original version of this movie was, just out of curiosity, because, you know, like clearly there's stuff in here that I think is good. Like I think the cinematography is good. I think Julianne Moore actually gives a pretty good performance here. And even like her scene with Amy Adams, where they're just like taking cat photos and drinking wine, is kind of, it's fun the way it's supposed to be. And I kind of wish the movie had that energy throughout. It wasn't taking itself so seriously at other points. Like there's like you said, like there's times where it's like trying to mimic Rear Window and these other Hitchcock movies, and it's also trying to do like the De Palma thing, and is also trying to be a little bit more cerebral, almost in like a I'm thinking of ending things sort of way. And it's just like, I think the movie's at its best when it's just kind of like leaning into its absurdity and goofy impulses and just being this kind of throwaway schlock movie that isn't good by design, but it's a little bit fun to watch on a Netflix Sunday afternoon. So I'll give it a sort of bemused C plus. Almost said B plus.
This thing is going places.
Yeah, like I said, it's not good. I don't know how you could really justify its quality, but considering what it's been through and everything that has going against it, I'm kind of surprised it was actually pretty watchable and silly throughout. Like it definitely ended up better than I anticipated, but not really, I guess, in the way that it was intending to be better.
All right, well, that is a double C plus from us. This movie, like we've mentioned a couple times, critics ain't loving it. 29% on Rotten Tomatoes. Well, the average rating is 4.9 out of 10. So it's one of those movies where I think people are rating it rotten, but they're not saying that it's like, oh my gosh, a 1 out of 10, 2 out of 10. They're just kind of like mixed to negative, which I think I think that makes a lot of sense to me. This movie, another movie that's only 100 minutes long, the same exact runtime as Those Who Wish Me Dead. So your choice between Angelina Jolie and Amy Adams has gotten even more difficult. If we were even having difficulty deciding between which of these two movies to do first, we were like, well, let's look at the runtime, exactly the same, all that. But all right, that is The Woman in the Window. It is now available to stream on Netflix. Our last movie of the week, Oxygen. This is a new French film. It is a sci-fi thriller that was directed and produced by Alexandre Aja, who always great to see new material from him. And this one kind of came out of nowhere for a lot of people. I certainly did not know he was making a new movie this year. I think his last movie was Crawl, if I'm not mistaken, from 2019. But yeah, this movie Oxygen stars Mélanie Laurent, another fun surprise. It was great to see her pop up in this movie. She is the lead character and one of the few characters we actually see in this movie, because this is... So remember Buried with Ryan Reynolds, where he's like trapped in a coffin?
Yeah.
I remember that movie.
That movie a lot.
That's a good movie. This is that, but in a cryogenic pod and kind of like the near future. So it's like a sci-fi twist on the buried alive genre. Not that she's buried alive necessarily, but Mélanie Laurent plays a woman who doesn't know her name. She doesn't even know what she looks like, but she wakes up in a cryogenic pod. She doesn't know why. And the only thing she has is a computer system named Milo, a glorified voice assistant, and she has to try to outwit it, to try to be like, okay, I need to make a call. Oh, you can't do that. Well, can you do this? And she tries to work around her limitations because her oxygen levels are running extremely low in the pod, and it's decreasing at a steady rate to the point where she even begins to start hallucinating, and she has to find a way out. If she tries to open the pod, she gets electrocuted. And there's a lot going on in this movie. Like a surprising amount of things are going on in a movie where we are only in one literal location the entire time, and almost the entire time at least. And I really dug this. I thought this was a really fun watch, and probably the best of the movies we're talking about this week, for me at least. What did you think of Oxygen, Will?
I would also say it's the best of the movies this week, slightly by default, but also, like you said, I think it works on its own merits. I don't think it's doing anything terribly new. I mean, like you said, it harkens back to a lot of other fairly recent one-woman show or one-man show type movies. And I don't think this one... It's painting with a very broad brush in terms of its narrative. I think at one point this was supposed to be an Anne Hathaway movie that was going to be, I guess, a little bit more Hollywoodized, and I can still kind of see the Hollywood version of this peeping out. But like you said, I do appreciate that. For one, this movie, I think its French sensibilities ultimately win over, and I think that makes it a little bit more interesting. It takes a little bit more creative risk, and it also has a little bit more stylistic choices that I think are a little bit more appealing. But also, this movie, I have to assume because they shot it in July of 2020, it's not incidental that this project came together during COVID.
Right.
And at a few points, the movie is outright explicitly like this is about COVID. But in a way that I didn't find it grating or like too on the nose like some other movies we've gotten of late. Certainly like bringing back Anne Hathaway, like thinking back to something like Lockdown. This is certainly more preferable in that, I think you could watch this out of context with COVID and still enjoy it because it's fairly tightly wound. Like I said, it is trying to do a lot, but it's also just focused primarily on Mélanie Laurent's performance. And I think that's quite good, as I was mentioning to you.
Is that how you pronounce it? Is it Mélanie? Mélanie?
You're going to ask me how you pronounce the name?
I don't know. Well, she's French, so, and I don't speak French, so I just want to make sure I'm pronouncing it correctly, but...
Oh, I have no... I mean, Mélanie Laurent.
Well, the emphasis, I think, is on the E, so it's Mélanie, I think.
Oh, is it?
I believe. Look, we're...
if you're listening,
more than,
I apologize.
Yeah, I apologize as well. Yeah. Nothing but apologies from the Cinemaholics gang.
She's a wonderful actress, and I think she does a great job here. And it's nice to see her have a star vehicle, not only because she's primarily a supporting actress in a lot of things like Beginners and Inglourious Basterds and Enemy, yeah. But she's been directing a lot of late, which unfortunately I haven't had a chance to see her directorial features, but I've been hearing a few of them are pretty good. Like I think she did one called Breathe in 2014 that's supposed to be like a coming of age French type movie. It's supposed to be quite good, and yeah.
Yeah, I know she's done some short films, right? Is that a short film or is that feature length?
No, she did a couple features. Like she did Galveston a few years ago. That's like an adaptation of Nick Pizzolatto's book. And then she did a coming-of-age film called Breathe from 2014, if I'm not mistaken. And she might have done one or two other films as a director, but primarily she's been focusing on doing stuff behind the camera. So that's why I was surprised to see her not only in front of the camera again, but a film that demands her be on screen for basically the whole entire thing. And I thought she did a great job. I know she's doing a movie, or her next movie's coming out later this year, isn't it? The Nightingale. It's not related to the Jennifer Kent one, but oh yeah, she's directing that one with the Fannings. Yeah, Dakota Fanning and Elle Fanning, I think. Yeah, I've heard about that. I think that got delayed due to COVID, so that's maybe why she jumped on this project. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it's been a long time since I can recall her doing a film in front of the camera, let alone as a star vehicle, and I think she's probably the main reason why I found myself so appealed to this film. All right, I looked it up, and I think the way you pronounce her name is Mélanie Laurent. Mélanie Laurent? Mélanie Laurent, yeah, essentially. So okay. We'll try it. Yeah, this movie's... Mélanie Laurent. This movie's, similar to Woman in the Window. It's been through some stuff. I think Noomi Rapace was also supposed to be replacing Anne Hathaway, and then... Oh, yeah. Yeah, that fell through as well. I think Aha was always on in here as like a producer, but then, yeah, eventually they just kind of reshuffled the deck during COVID last year, and here we have Oxygen, and I kind of wish this movie had been released at a different time, because it's kind of like in this glut of other releases, and it's an okay time to release a sci-fi film, to be sure, but this didn't even release on a Friday. I mean, this released a couple days before everything hit. It's not the big Netflix of the movie of the week, and I think that's a shame. I think they're kind of like maybe almost like not allergic, but averse to this being French language, and assuming people are gonna like not be into it because of subtitles. Although there is that thing now where like now if you watch like a Netflix movie, it like defaults to the dubbed over stuff, which I hate, and I have to change it all the time. Oh, what? No, wait, the dub? Yeah. It went to the dub for you? Yeah. Huh. It does that for me for a lot of things. It was subtitle for me. Every time I try to watch something new weird. That is in a different language, like when I started watching Lupin, it defaults to the English dubbed voiceover, and I have to manually switch it every episode back to the original pronunciations. It's so frustrating. I don't know why that is. Well, where are you watching these films? It's called Netflix. Like on your... Yeah, no, I know. But I mean, like, are you watching it through your TV? Different things. Yeah, TV, iPad, and on TV it's like Apple TV, so... Okay. I don't know what the deal is, man. I just want to hear people's real voices. Because I watched this in both on my TV and my laptop, like I had to switch halfway through, and both times it went directly to the subtitle version. It never played the dub version.
Maybe it's a settings thing. Maybe you have it set to the right thing, and I'm just
I don't know,
goofing over here.
I didn't have that issue, but I'm sure you're not alone. I just that was an issue for me.
Yeah. Also in this movie is Mathieu Amalric. We just hear his voice as the sort of Sal 2000 knockoff Milo, and a pretty effective vocal performance too. And then also Malik Zidi plays a man named Leo. We start to kind of slowly get to know over the course of the movie through flashbacks.
Did you call him Sal 2000?
Sal. Oh, I was thinking of Recess. I think in Recess it's Sal.
You think of Hal 2000.
Hal
2001.
Well, I've always done that because I saw Recess before I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey. So like I've never been able. I always default.
Oh, is that a parody?
Yeah. So in Recess, there's an episode where they have like a new playground system called Sal, and so like that's embarrassing. But I'm just gonna lean into that. But no, this movie is super effective, and there were times in this when I was a little bit. I was like, well, how is she going to get out of this? How is she going to, there were a couple times like very early in the film, I was like, well, why don't you just do this, or this? And then at the end of the movie, she does that. And I'm like, she could have done that the whole time. There's stuff like that. Like, I was like, sometimes the movie's pretty clever. Sometimes I think that like it plays into something like it's a big revelation of like, oh my gosh, only a genius like her could think it. And it's like, I think most people will kind of call a lot of what's going on in this movie. There were a few things that took me totally by surprise though. Almost to the point where it feels a little bit out of nowhere, like what's really going on. But then some stuff definitely matches where like, if you call it early on, it doesn't ruin the movie at all, but it is one of those things. It's like, yes, I had a feeling that was what the case was. And it really matches like what you're seeing. And it's one of those twists that feels inevitable, not just like shocking for the sake of it. So yeah, this is a pretty effective, this is like one of those movies I would recommend to people who are like really like, for whatever reason, I do not know a lot of these people, but if you like claustrophobic sci-fi, this is certainly going to deliver.
Yeah, I mean, generally, I think it works. Like I said, I do agree with you that, I guess, like I said, the broad, predictable aspects of it kind of grate me because I think they're working against what otherwise I think is a pretty efficient one-woman show thriller film that is pretty resourceful in terms of like getting interesting angles out of this one location and allowing, let me see if I can get this right, Mélanie Laurent. Mélanie Laurent, to really just showcase her undervalued star power as an actress. And I think, I think what works here really works enough to where I can overlook some of the stuff that I did find kind of predictable and shallow or a little bit grating in terms of like, you have to like kind of like indulge the movie in certain aspects to like allow it to be a 90 to 100-minute narrative. Because like if she had figured something out early on, it would have been only 30 minutes long, and it's just like fine, whatever. I mean, even despite that, my only real thing was that yet again, this is the type of film I kind of wish I saw in theaters because like seeing this on Netflix, I don't think it's bad. I admire the accessibility, but I feel like the claustrophobia would have been more effective in the theater. That's kind of the same issue that I had with the Joseph Gordon-Levitt film from last year that we covered. What was that, 7500?
I was going to say, I was like, Trial of Chicago 7.
No. Well, he wasn't that as well, but the one where it's like another kind of like chamber thriller kind of thing. And, I mean, I find these type of films very appealing and because there's an urgency to them that's always renewing itself. And generally speaking, they keep the stakes kind of closely knit. And so I can find it pretty readily engaging. But I found this to be a pretty likable little taunt chamber thriller.
Yeah, and I think Mélanie Laurent kills it in this. I mean, she has to for any of this to really work. And I felt for her. I thought that whenever she is like panicking and she is like trying to calm herself down, all of that was really believable. It was watchable without it being like, oh, I don't want to watch somebody go through this. And that's so hard to do. It's so difficult to do. I think that like a movie like that can overplay on our sympathies a bit. And I think this movie knew just the right moments to pull it back and let her sort of like show us a moment of competence that she's still in control of the situation. And I also think the score kind of helps guide us along in that respect too. I mean, it's just really competent in every respect. The only like real downsides of this movie I can pinpoint are that it's probably a little bit slightly too long. And as I mentioned before, a couple of the twists are a little bit out of nowhere to the point where it really just isn't set up very properly. And if it were up to me, I would cut out the last couple minutes of the movie, because I think like what it does in the very end felt very much like I don't know. I felt like you just didn't need it. Like, I think ending it a different way would have been way more effective. Like ending it, cheesy. Cutting it a little bit short would have done more to bring closure to this movie in a kind of counterintuitive way almost. So at the same time, I really like this, even though I think it's going to be kind of limited by, I think a lot of people are not going to immediately be into a movie like this. And I totally understand that, especially if you struggle with claustrophobia yourself, and if you're just not in the mood to watch a single location film. I think that kind of thing could be really hit or miss. I will say, to this movie's benefit, it gets a lot better as it goes along. I think the first 10, 15 minutes are a little bit slow, a little bit of a like, where is this going? But it really picks up, and I think that it goes in some directions that I think are really satisfying to watch. So I'm a strong B on Oxygen. What about you?
I'm not too far from where you are. I do agree with you. It does get better as it goes along. I don't think it's ever necessarily slow, but I do agree with you that it does. I think try to add a little bit more than it can really chew, and it's constantly just trying to like keep the audience engaged to the point where I almost kind of admire when it just is able to be a lot more simple and straightforward. But I think the star power of Mélanie Laurent, it pulls this off, and I really enjoy the direction and cinematography here. I think Alexandre Ahi, is that how you pronounce his name, or is it
Alexandra Aha?
Aha. Okay, so I thought it was AGE. Is it AJA?
It's AJA.
Oh, okay. For whatever reason, I thought it was AJE. Whatever. But yeah, no, I think he's good with this type of thing. Like we said, Crawl is another example of how it's a kind of throwaway B movie, but he brings a lot of his taunt direction and his ability to make simple premises really pop, and that's no exception here. So if it weren't for some of the predictable story beats, I think I'd give it a B as well, but I'm going to give it a very high B-.
I looked it up, and it's Alexandre Aha, I think.
Okay. Well, I apologize to him and Mélanie Laurent.
Sorry, I have to correct myself again. I said aha again because it's like what I default to. It's aja. It's because I bring Spanish into it. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I mean, you at least have an excuse. I don't. So.
Oh, gosh. All right. Well, that is Oxygen. I definitely think it is worth seeking out on Netflix if you're looking for something a little deeper, a little bit more interesting than the usual streaming service fare we tend to get. It's just 101 minutes long. They kind of missed it, though. If it was 102, it would be 02.
Well, that's what I thought they were going to do, but they didn't.
Oh, yeah, you did message me about that.
Yeah.
And it's coming out in it was supposed to come out in 2020, which backwards is 02.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they did a quiet release. They're so ashamed.
I guess, yeah.
And that's it for our show this week. Be sure to subscribe to us on all the social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook. That's in the show notes. And next week, we will be talking about Army of the Dead and a few other things, we assume, and hoping to do some bonus content as well. Yeah. We want to talk Underground Railroad. Mm-hmm. We want to talk Killing of Two Lovers. We'll do what we can here. But yeah, it's been an interesting time at the movies this summer. I'm almost wondering, do we need to do a summer movie preview? Is that possible again?
I don't know, man.
If we had a light week, I think it would be doable. But there's just so many movies we can't pause for even a second to look forward. So we're just going to keep things moving.
Yeah. There might be a possible fall movie preview option, depending on how August or September looks. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it.
Sounds good to me. Well, from the Internet, California, I am John Negroni.
And from the Internet, Pennsylvania, I'm Will Ashton.
See you next time.